So today we are answering the question, can the Earth be conscious? And in answering this question, we are going to look at ideas by Teilhard de Chardin and the Noosphere, and Hegel and the Absolute Spirit, and of course Hyperianism, as we understand we are our creation of a collective consciousness here on Earth. This is very important for understanding the Hyperion concept of creating a new Earth and a new humanity, because of course humanity is just a microcosm of the Earth's macrocosm. So let's begin, and to be able to understand this better, we're going to be looking at an article. Now this article is written from the point of view of an individual that seems to be a materialist, so it's not exactly accurate at all, but we're going to be using it to address questions relating to this very important subject today. So the title of this article is, Can the Earth Be Conscious? So right now, at this very moment, you are submerged in an invisible sea of information. Information is all around you. Thoughts, ideas, ambitions, and instructions. They are whispering past and through you on waves, modulated electromagnetic energy. From wireless internet to satellite TV, you are bathed in an endless stream of purposeful, intentional signal. And it's not just you. From the Earth's surface out to a geosynchronous orbit, the whole planet glows with information made manifest in light, actual light, as in radio waves, microwaves, etc. Does all that thought mean the Earth is thinking? Does that mean it's awake? Maybe it's time to consider the Noosphere. Now, what is the Noosphere? I'm going to explain in just a moment, but the term Noosphere was first coined by the Jesuit priest and paleontologist Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. A fascinating blend of contradictions, de Chardin lived as a respected scientist on the one hand and a passionate mystic on the other. Having seen the horrors of World War I up close, he was sure the natural processes of evolution, which he was committed to, were leading humanity toward a kind of higher and more perfect unity. As a paleontologist, de Chardin looked across Earth's history and saw the critical transition Earth made billions of years ago from a dead planet to a world dominated by life, the biosphere. As a mystic, he believed the next step was going to take us from a mindless biosphere to a world ruled by intention, by mind. Evolution, he claimed, was taking us towards what he called the Noosphere. Nous is Greek for mind, a global unity of consciousness, a thinking sphere circling the Earth above the biosphere, which would comprise all human reflections, conscious souls, and love. So, here's this idea. So right now you are submerged in an ocean of thought. There is thought all around you, and this very important thinker who's responsible for important ideas in Hyperianism like the Omega Point is Teilhard de Chardin, and he believed that the Earth is evolving in a teleological way, which means in a directed way. Now, biologists are against this idea. Biologists are large and by materialists, and they believe that evolution is completely random. It's not following any kind of progression or direction. Now, of course, that's absolutely ridiculous. In Hyperianism, we know that evolution is teleological in that it is progressive and directed. And you can just look around you and see that, the outcome of evolution is growth. Now, it's not always linear growth. There are, a lot of dead ends. There's a lot of dips and curves. But ultimately, we are a teleologically evolving species. As a species of mind, as monadic minds who are othered and reflected onto the Earth. So evolution is not random, as many biologists would have you believe, but it is rather directed towards a goal. Now, in the beginning, evolution is all about survival, but as we be able to increase in complexity, it goes beyond survival, and as Nietzsche understood, it is about optimization, or in Nietzschean terms, will to power. Now, here's the idea that de Chardin had, in that, you have this evolving humanity, this evolving world, this evolving planet. And as the planet evolves, it develops the biosphere. And the biosphere is all the parts of Earth associated with life. That's the biosphere. But de Chardin said that what would happen would be that the Earth will also have a noosphere. And noosphere is based on the Greek word nous, which means mind. So a noosphere would be a mental sphere, in that the noosphere is the accumulation of all the thoughts associated with Earth. So if you look at the biosphere as being all the parts of the Earth associated with life, you could look at the noosphere as sort of this sphere that would encompass the Earth and be filled with all the collective thoughts of all humanity. And that's what de Chardin looked at as the noosphere. And he believed that humanity would continue to evolve, continue to grow until it became beyond human and eventually would reach the omega point, which would be the culmination of all evolution. Now, the question is here, is since the Earth is encapsulated in all this thought, according to de Chardin, is the Earth itself conscious? And that's the question that we're going to be asking in terms of Hyperianism. Now, it's important to understand that also Hegel's idea of spirit. So I want to talk a little bit about the philosopher Hegel and his idea, which is very important to what we are discussing today. Now, Hegel had another idea that's similar to de Chardin's, but a little bit different. So de Chardin looked at the world as being evolving towards an omega point, and it would eventually evolve this noosphere, which was sort of this sphere of thought that encapsulated the Earth, and this would sort of be like the consciousness of the Earth in a certain way. And so, but Hegel had a philosophy that was a bit different but similar in certain ideas. Hegel had this idea of spirit, which is similar to the noosphere, but not quite the same. So basically, to put it in a nutshell, what Hegel's idea is that reality is a system of pure thought, of pure thinking, all right? It's just pure thought. That's what reality is. And then reality, as pure rational thought, others itself or externalizes itself into nature or the physical world. So according to Hegel, the physical world is just thought that has externalized itself. If you're having a hard time understanding, well, what does that really mean? What could that be like? Think about a dream world. When you go to sleep and dream, your dream world is simply your thoughts, your mind, that has externalized itself into an interactive world. When you interact in your dream world, well, you're just interacting with your thoughts, but your thoughts have othered themselves and are now represented as physical objects, objects, dream individuals, dream people, things like that. So Hegel believed that the world, all reality, worked in the same way. All reality is pure rational thought that then others itself into the physical world and nature. Then, when conscious individuals like humanity begin forming collectives, such as societies and cultures, that is what Hegel called spirit. The interaction of and the interaction of conscious beings interacting with one another. This collective of interacting conscious beings is what Hegel called spirit. Now, this is similar to de Chardin's idea of the noosphere, but you can see it's a bit different. So according to de Chardin, you have the Earth, which is evolving, and then you get humans, and then it sort of forms this kind of sphere of thought that encapsulates the earth. This is the noosphere. Now, Hegel's idea is a bit different. Hegel's idea is that all reality is thought that then others itself into nature, and then conscious beings within nature begin to form collectives and societies, and that this collective, these societies, is what Hegel calls spirit. Now, what's really important here is that in Hegel's idea, once these societies become conscious of themselves as what they are, as in once they realize, hey, we are thought that has just othered itself, in other words, we are God, this is known as absolute spirit, and this is sort of the next step. It's the collective consciousness that has become self-aware. So you can have individuals that become aware individuals gain self-awareness. They look at themselves and reflect, oh, I'm self-aware, and they start to understand this. Well, according to Hegel, humanity as a whole, the collective, can become aware of itself, can become self-aware. And this is known as absolute spirit, where thinking beings realize that they are reality itself. So you can see that there are some differences between de Chardin and Hegel. And absolute spirit, in terms of de Chardin, would sort of be like a noosphere that gains self-awareness, a noosphere that has become conscious of itself. That's a bit like what absolute spirit is in Hegelian terms. But you can see the commonalities in both, in that it deals with a collective of minds and their thoughts. In de Chardin, the noosphere is a collective of minds and their thoughts, and in Hegel's system, spirit is a collective of minds and their thoughts. There are important differences, but it's similar. Now, the question is, does this mean that the earth is conscious? Well, let's look at this in terms of Hyperianism. And before I look at this in terms of Hyperianism, I want to point out a materialist version of the noosphere. In other words, a lot of people thought that de Chardin was kind of crazy for this idea. But then the internet was invented, and a lot of people thought, wow, you know what? What de Chardin was talking about seems a lot like the internet. So if we look at this article, it says, but then a funny thing happened. Humanity ended up building an actual noosphere, or at least its first draft. It was called the internet. Somewhere around the mid-1900s, a few people looked at the world wiring itself together and thought, this seems a lot like what that de Chardin guy was thinking. It was all pretty utopian back then, as was most thinking about the internet. When writing on the noosphere and the web, Electronic Frontier Foundation co-founder John Perry put it this way. What Teilhard was saying can easily be summed up in a few words. The point of all evolution up to this stage is the creation of a collective organism of mind. So, a lot of materialists look at the internet as being the noosphere. Now, is the internet the noosphere? Not exactly. It's not. It is a helpful evolutionary tool for the noosphere, though. Now, by the way, I want to say that let me begin by explaining Hyperianism's take in all this, because I don't want you to think that in Hyperianism we think that there is an actual sort of bubble of thought that surrounds the earth. That's not true. That's not how it actually works. Conceptual thought is actually outside space and time. just like your mind is outside space and time. However, that being said, there is the collective of thoughts associated with humanity and the earth. So how does this work in terms of Hyperianism? So in terms of Hyperianism, we know that we are all eternal monadic minds. We are all eternal minds outside space and time that link to avatars on Earth. We link to avatars on Earth in order to grow, learn, and evolve. First, we link to animal organisms. As we grow and evolve and new avatars become available, we eventually link to human avatars. As we interact together on Earth, our minds begin to evolve, we gain new data, we gain new knowledge, we gain new information. As we interact on Earth through avatars, our minds begin to evolve. Now here is the important thing to understand. Through our interactions on Earth, which includes our interactions through the internet, because the internet allows us to interact in a more interconnected way. Before the internet, we are more isolated. However, Earth makes sure that we are all connected. You know, if we were scattered all across the universe, we would have no way of being connected. But you see, through our interactions on Earth, we are increasing our level of connectedness. First, we're just connected because of spatiality. We're confined to this spherical rock that is limited in space and time, which means we are forced to interact together. We are forced to share knowledge. We are forced to build societies. And what this does is it forces us to interact. Now, as we increase in our technology, our interconnectedness also increases, like the internet. So things like the internet and ultimately the metaverse and all that is extremely important. Because look at right now, I'm able to talk to you and get this information to you right now. This is increasing our interconnectedness through the internet. It is a tool. Now, what is happening? Because we are confined to this planetary sphere and increasing in our interconnectedness, we are in these avatars that are bound to this, limited spatiality, but what effect is this having on us as eternal monadic minds? The effect that this is happening is that it is increasing our synchronization. It is increasing our ability to act together in harmonious ways. We are learning as monadic minds how to operate together as a collective. That's what's happening when we are forced to interact in this limited spherical plane. Well, it's not really a plane, but you get what I'm saying. This literal spherical Earth that we exist in, we are forced to interact together. And we have a lot of conflicts, we have wars, we have bloodsheds, but through this dialectical struggle, we realize that, hey, guess what? If we want to survive and then in the future not only survive but thrive, we have to learn how to live together. We have to learn how to become more harmonious. As we do so, we are living in more harmony. We are living in a more synchronized way. As we make our world more interconnected through the development of technology, like the internet, we are beginning to develop and still work in more harmonious ways. So we are learning to act and form a collective. And this is what Hegel calls spirit. And in Hyperianism, what it simply is a collective of monadic minds that are learning to act together in a harmonious way, in a synthesized way. And as we grow and evolve together, we form this interconnected collective in that we are a monadic neural network that is beginning to recognize itself as a neural network. And we are forming a collective mind made up of individuals. And as we achieve absolute consciousness, which is the goal of Hyperianism, is ultimately to get the Earth to evolve to the next step. by getting it to achieve absolute consciousness, we realize that we are God. So in a very interesting way, you can look at Earth as being conscious, but only conscious through us. It's not like the Earth has some independent consciousness outside of us. It's not like the Earth has its own mind. The Earth only becomes conscious through us. We are the consciousness of the Earth. We are individual monadic minds that have linked to avatars on Earth. And the Earth serves as the environment that is necessary for us as minds to interact together and ultimately form that collective consciousness that becomes aware of itself as the absolute and all reality. And you can see it is one consciousness and many consciousnesses at the same time. It is one and many. It is one collective consciousness formed by many individual monadic minds that have learned to operate in harmony together and have become self-reflective and understand that we are all reality and we are absolute reality. So yes, the Earth is conscious, but not in a way that is separate from us. It is conscious in that we are the consciousness of the Earth. It doesn't have anything to do with the Earth having a separate consciousness from us. We are the consciousness of the Earth, just as we are the consciousness of God. So what we can learn here is that we can understand what the idea, what planets actually are. What is the purpose of a planet? What is a planet? The purpose of a planet, the function of a planet, is to form the necessary conditions for monadic minds to synchronize and form a collective mind. That is what a planet is. That is what a planet does. That is the purpose of a planet. You can think of the planet as being like a seed, or almost like an incubation chamber of sorts. It provides the environment necessary for minds to be able to interact and form a collective consciousness. That is what a planet is. And so as we become more interconnected through technology, through the transmission of information, we are going to be able to become more and more interconnected through our thoughts, and we will be able to create new terra. The mission of Hyperianism is to create new terra, which is a fully integrated, fully interconnected Earth. We will create a new humanity and a new Earth, in that we will create an Earth that is aware of itself, new terra. But once again, it's not an Earth that is aware of itself separate from us. It is only aware of itself through us. It is what we are. Now, ultimately, when we reach our own individual omega points as the Earth, once we create a new society here on Earth, ultimately we will become so interconnected that we will be able to create our own frequency pattern, and that we will be able to create our own collective dream world that will be now outside the bounds and outside the necessity of needing Earth as being an actual spatially temporal location. In other words, Earth originally exists as this finite, spherical, spatially temporally bound place where we exist together, and being that we exist in this limited area, we learn to interact and grow and form a collective, and we become more and more interconnected. This is what the Earth does. This is what its purpose is. Then eventually we evolve and grow. We form that collective. We build a physical new terra. But eventually we become so interconnected and so highly evolved as a collective of eternal minds that we will no longer even need the physical aspect of the earth anymore. We will be able to transcend that and create a purely mental existence based on frequency patterns as we grow in our ability to understand and develop technology, and also our ability to be able to form an interconnected mental synchronization with every single one of us. So you can see how the earth originally begins as this physical place that allows us to evolve as a collective. We learn how to grow and evolve through our interconnected environment, through technology, through creating meritocratic systems, through raising the earth to absolute consciousness. Then down the road, long into the future, once we are able to achieve maximum evolution via technology and via our minds and via our interconnectedness, we will no longer even need the physical aspect of the earth at all. We can sort of shed it off like an unnecessary skin. So, what is the earth, and is the earth conscious? Well, the earth is the necessary conditions needed to be able to form an interconnected neural monadic network that is aware of itself. A collective mind. That's what an earth is. That's what a planet is. It is an environment that allows for the growth of a collective mind. That is what a planet is. So, is the planet itself actually conscious? Well, not itself, not apart from us. But if you want to think of it as being conscious through us, then yes, it is, in that it formed the necessary conditions necessary to form a collective mind, but through us. Now, but it's important to understand that in order to get to that point, we have to be able to work within the physical domain. So we need to be able to construct a physical new terra, an actual meritocratic, teleocratic, dialectical society right here, right now on Earth. That's the first step. That's what we have to do. And so it's very important to not get this pie in the sky sort of idea of like a heaven far off. No. What we need to do right here and right now is transform the world. We want to transform humanity and transform the earth. And ultimately, we will do that by raising the consciousness of humanity, getting humanity to step in to absolute consciousness, and then we will be able to create a physical new terra right here and right now. And once we create a physical new terra right here on Earth, we will be able to create conditions more conducive to the evolution of humanity. Because what is the goal of New Terra? Remember, New Terra is teleological. And the teleological goal of New Terra is to create a divine humanity, a society of the divine. And we will create a society of the divine by making sure that every single one of the citizens of the earth has everything necessary to be able to actualize their potential, which means universal basic income, necessary housing, all the food that they need, access to the world's best education, access to the world's best healthcare, access to the world's best psychology, everything that a citizen would possibly need to be able to actualize their individual growth and the growth as a collective as a whole. You see, right now, the earth exists in a state that is very fragmented and divided. You can see that the different governments and institutions of the world they do not have any kind of teleological goal. They are not uniting humanity. It is dividing humanity. Look at all the wars. Look at all the bloodshed. Look at all the sexism. Look at all the hatred. Look at all the different, governments trying to one-up each other and a quest for world domination. We want to do away with all of that and create New Terra, where the collective goal of the earth is to transform each and every one of its citizens into divinity, into the best versions they can possibly be, and create even infinitely better conditions to be able to create fully actualized individuals and in an interconnected whole. Because we live in a terrible, disconnected world right now. So it's about time that we understand what we are and create a world, create an earth that reflects that understanding. And in that sense, it is an earth that has become self-aware. Through us, we have become aware of ourselves as a collective, as the absolute, and can begin to construct a society that maximizes that understanding and maximizes our growth so that we can finally create a brilliant new world. I want to give a big shout out to all the supporters on Patreon, especially Kuroi Kumo, Neruda, Rupfu, Renaissance Fairy, Jordy, and Liam, and all our top supporters. You guys are awesome. If you enjoy my work, consider supporting on Patreon. You'll get access to our weekly secret live streams, my lecture notes, and a lot more. It's the best way to support my work with all the deplatforming that goes on Facebook and on YouTube. Thank you guys very much for your support.